who pays for the ignition interlock devices that people are sometimes required to put on their cars?
Well, the person who pays for it is the person who gets convicted. And that's 100% of it. There is no state funding that goes along with it. And it can be rather complicated, especially in central Pennsylvania, which is cold. It has a high tendency, some of these devices, if they're not from a very good manufacturer, to lock up, be prone to being cold and not doing things correctly that it's supposed to do. If you make mistakes, for example, if you eat bread immediately before you drive and you blow into it, sometimes it will trigger as an alcohol event. And so then it'll flag your car, your horn and your lights and everything will go flashing, and then it'll be what's called a lockdown event. Then you have to take it to the manufacturer or the manufacturer's representative, get it reset, and all of that costs money.
And what is it, about $100 per month to have one of those devices?
Yeah, it generally depends. The installation is usually a couple $100, and then it goes from anywhere I've seen as low as $50 to maybe about $150, per month as a maintenance that you're required to do. And then also on top of it, that if you have those lockdown events, those are generally, again, somewhere between $75 to $150.
So those costs can really add up. Another reason to fight the DUI at the beginning, huh?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Do these devices work, or can people trick them? They have a friend blow into it, for example.
Well, sure. That's always a big problem and a big concern that goes along with it. Hopefully, if you have that friend in the car who doesn't have any alcohol, they'll be the one who's driving the car as opposed to you who have the alcohol. But, that is conceivable, that can be done, and these things can be tricked. They can be fooled.
Okay, Justin, so bottom line, if I've been arrested for DUI and I'm watching this video on the website right now, why should I give you and your firm a phone call?
Well, it's actually pretty simple, because this is what we do all day long. We don't do anything else. We specialize in this. We use our reputation, our knowledge and experience, and our guts to go out there and try and minimize the consequences or eliminate them altogether. And we do that successfully day in and day out for clients.
Now, on a very human level, I think I would be embarrassed if I were arrested. I'd be scared. I'd be nervous about the whole process. How would you help me feel more comfortable?
Well, what we do is we listen. That's one of our major traits that we have, is that we listen to people and listen to their situations. You're just not a number to us. You are a person. You have feelings. You have emotions. We know this is stressful. This is the worst thing that has probably ever happened to you in your life. It's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to you as far as anyone that you know that's going on right now. And so what we do is we take the time to really listen to you, because we care and we want to go out there and fight and try and get the best result that we can.
If I volunteered to go to an alcohol treatment program or into counseling, would that help me when I go to court?
Well, you should always take a look at that. If you have an alcohol problem, you need to go get help. There's no doubt about it. But in terms of whether or not it'll soften the blow or make any determinations in terms of whether or not your case gets handled differently, generally speaking, the answer to that is no. So if you're going into treatment or therapy, you should do that for your own personal reasons. In terms of whether or not you can exchange some of the jail time for inpatient time, for example, that depends upon each jurisdiction and each judge in each jurisdiction. So it's not something that you could necessarily sit there and say, well, I'm going to go do inpatient time, because you don't know whether or not it will get granted.
Could it be used against me as an admission that I have an alcohol problem?
No, it can't be used against you. That would be impermissible. It can be brought up at trial or anything like that.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, on the drug issues, if I get a DUID, driving under the influence of drugs, and it's an illegal drug, I could be charged with some drug possession crimes. Would you be able to help me with that as well?
Absolutely. There's been massive change in the jurisprudence or the law when it comes to those types of cases. A great case called Commonwealth versus Griffith that comes into play here that says that they need to have a toxicologist or someone to come into court to explain what the nanograms per deciliter, what they say is inside your blood, and relate it to impairment. Because unlike alcohol, where we all have a general idea that, a 0.34, boy, that person's pretty drunk. But if you say 5 nanograms per deciliter, what does that mean? And so the bottom line of it is that there's 2 different types of DUID cases in Pennsylvania. One is that you're impaired because of the drug, and the other one is because you have the metabolites or the byproducts of it inside your blood. And so each one of those cases require a state's expert to come in there. And generally speaking, they don't bring them in.
Does Pennsylvania have a tough on drugs kind of philosophy?
Yes, in terms of either possessing it or actually DUID, we find a lot of times that they take a very hard stance at those types of cases and make them no-deal cases. Especially when it comes to illegal drugs. If you have marijuana in your system, for example, they take a very hard look at that, and they look for reasons to continue in the prosecution, maybe when the facts or the science or even the common sense don't add up in the prosecution's favor.
And if law enforcement finds marijuana in my system, can I argue, well, those tests only show that I smoked marijuana within the last 30 days?
Yes, in terms of the impairment, and it goes anywhere between 45 days to 15 days, depending upon whether or not you're a chronic user or anything like that. And generally speaking, what they're looking at is the difference between the different types of metabolites to see whether or not it was active in your system, or else it's inactive in your system and a byproduct. And then on top of that, when you take a look in the case of marijuana in particular, many times, because of how long the detection level is, it could be very unfair in terms of if you smoked marijuana, or else even if you're around someone who smoked marijuana, that you could be falsely accused of an impaired driving case because the prosecutor or even especially the police officer may not know how to take a look at these results, and we do.